I've had obstructive sleep apnea nearly as long as I can remember. Initially, I blamed my inability to sleep on too much bad news rattling around in my brain. I learned about human population overshoot when I was a first-year college student. Even then, too many people on a finite planet seemed like a bad idea. It still does. Recent research indicates that my inability to sleep might result from something other than too many humans constantly adding to the ongoing planetary disaster. An article in New Atlas on June 16, 2025 is titled, "Sleep Apnea Cases to Rise 45% and One Global Factor is to Blame." Here's the lead, followed by an additional sentence to complete the first paragraph. Quote, in 2005, around 24 million Americans are estimated to suffer from sleep apnea, and around 90% of these cases are undiagnosed. Now, a groundbreaking new study warns that this is going to rapidly increase as the planet warms. End quote. The buried lead is found in the next paragraph. Quote, new research by scientists at Australia's Flinders University has found a link between new cases of sleep apnea and climate change, which is on trend with many chronic conditions and diseases expected to be more prevalent as temperatures rise. Increased temperatures are expected to also increase the severity of obstructive sleep apnea, with cases doubling in most countries within the next century. End quote. Lest you believe this is bad science reported in an outlet you've never heard of, the research reported in New Atlas was published in the renowned peer-reviewed Nature series of journals. Specifically, it was published on June 16, 2025 in Nature Communications. The peer-reviewed open-access paper is titled, "Global Warming May Increase the Burden of Obstructive Sleep Apnea." It was written by 15 scholars. Back to the article in New Atlas, the lead author of the peer-reviewed paper is quoted. He is a research associate at the Adelaide Institute for Sleep Health. Quote, this study helps us to understand how environmental factors like climate might affect health by investigating whether ambient temperatures influence the severity of obstructive sleep apnea. Overall, we were surprised by the magnitude of the association between ambient temperature and obstructive sleep apnea severity. Higher temperatures were associated with a 45% increased likelihood of a sleeper experiencing obstructive sleep apnea on a given night. End quote. The article in New Atlas continues, quote, around 1 billion people around the world are already impacted by sleep apnea, which at best causes daytime fatigue, but is a key factor in elevated blood pressure and in turn stroke and heart attack. If left untreated, it also increases the risk of a suite of conditions including depression, dementia, and Parkinson's disease. End quote. Perhaps lack of sleep is responsible for my dementia, and several medical doctors and researchers have concluded that lack of sleep is contributing to my declining cognition. They claim I need to sleep more and better, although none have provided a means by which I might do so. With respect to depression, I am a carrier, although I'm not depressed. In addition, I am not demonstrating signs of Parkinson's disease. The article in New Atlas goes on to explain how the peer-reviewed research was conducted. Quote, in this study, scientists looked at the data of 116,620 people around the globe using a mattress sensor to assess their obstructive sleep apnea severity. Each individual had their bed fitted with a sensor, which recorded around 500 separate nights of sleep data from each person. This information was then paired with corresponding 24-hour temperature information drawn from climate models. End quote. The article goes on to quote the first author of the peer-reviewed paper. Quote, using our modeling, we can estimate how burdensome the increase in obstructive sleep apnea prevalence due to rising temperature is to society in terms of well-being and economic loss. The increase in obstructive sleep apnea prevalence in 2023 due to global warming was associated with a loss of approximately 800,000 healthy life years across the 29 countries studied. This number is similar to other medical conditions such as bipolar disorder, Parkinson's disease, or chronic kidney diseases. End quote. The article in New Atlas explains, quote, so what does hotter temperatures have to do with how well we sleep? Previous studies had linked an increased ambient temperature in the bedroom with poorer sleep quality. Not surprisingly, these results predict that people in lower socioeconomic areas and countries will be at a higher risk of obstructive sleep apnea due to a lack of access to cooling devices such as air conditioning. End quote. The lead author of the peer-reviewed paper is then quoted. Quote, importantly, these findings varied by region, with people in European countries seeing higher rates of obstructive sleep apnea when temperatures rise than those in Australia and the United States, perhaps due to different rates of air conditioning usage. End quote. Because everything is always related to the monetary system, the article in New Atlas paints the economic picture. Quote, economically, this climate-induced increase in obstructive sleep apnea is expected to create a huge financial burden, U.S. $68 billion from well-being loss, and $30 billion thanks to a negative impact on workplace productivity. End quote. The first author of the peer-reviewed paper is then quoted. Quote, our findings highlight that without greater policy action to slow global warming, obstructive sleep apnea burden may double by 2100 due to rising temperatures. End quote. Never mind the distant prospect of human survival by 2100. Never mind the extreme likelihood that Earth will support life by then. The negative consequences of obstructive sleep apnea are happening now. Adverse economic impacts are already being felt. Cases of bipolar disorder, Parkinson's disease, and chronic kidney diseases are rising now. As explained in the New Atlas article, quoting another peer-reviewed open-access paper in the renowned Nature series of publications, quote, scientists assessed sleep data from more than 200,000 people in China and also found that rising ambient temperatures would have a huge physical, mental, and economical impact on residents as the planet continued to warm. End quote. This peer-reviewed open-access paper was published March 17, 2025, titled Climate Warming May Undermine Sleep Duration and Quality in Repeated Measure Study of 23 Million Records. The paper was authored by 9 scholars and published in Nature Communications. I will read from the abstract of this latter peer-reviewed paper. Quote, for each 10 degrees C increase in ambient temperature, the odds of sleep insufficiency increased by 20.1%, while total sleep duration decreased by 9.67 minutes, with deep sleep declining the most, parenthetically by 2.82%. End quote. I will now read from the abstract of the peer-reviewed paper I mentioned earlier. Quote, warming-related increase in obstructive sleep apnea prevalence in 2023 was estimated to be associated with a loss of 788,198 healthy life years in 29 countries and a workplace productivity loss of 30 billion United States dollars. Scenarios with projected temperatures greater than 1.8 degrees C above pre-industrial levels would incur a further 1.2 to 3-fold increase in obstructive sleep apnea burden by 2100. End quote. Again, never mind the distant prospect of human survival by 2100. According to governments of the world, we passed the 2C Rubicon in October 2023. Expressing concern about, quote, greater than or equal to 1.8 degrees C above pre-industrial levels, end quote, seems disingenuous. The bad news continues to appear. Obstructive sleep apnea is the latest in a long string of adverse consequences resulting from abrupt, irreversible climate change.